As it's 1 minute past the hour, the webinar is now going to start. Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar on measuring the impact of green public procurement, which is brought to you by the Asia Pacific GPP network. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you've got any questions for all the panelists throughout the webinar, please make use of the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. There will be dedicated parts after each part of the webinar where panelists will be able to answer your questions. So yeah, keep the questions coming. Your questions can be directed to all panelists or specific panelists. Do bear that in mind. The meeting will be recorded, so it will also be available to you after the webinar is done. We will send that round along with the presentations of all the panelists, and it will also be available on the UNEP website. To quickly go over the agenda before we start, in the first hour of the webinar, we will offer you an introduction to the monitoring of GPP impacts. First, we'll hear from Farid Yaka from UNEP on a global perspective on monitoring GPP impacts. Following that, Bettina Schaefer from Eco Institute will talk about the overview of different approaches to measuring GPP impacts. And Mors Fassbinder from SCAL will talk about accelerating carbon reduction through the power of procurement. There will be a short Q&A session, and then part 2 will begin on applied methods in measuring GPP impacts. We will start off with Ding Ling from the China Environmental United Certification Center, followed by Martin Stanley from the Norwegian Agency for Public and Financial Management. Following that, Malik Binatan from the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, Sanjay Kumar from Indian Railways, and Ashley Mclennan from Eco Institute, based in Germany. With that, I would like to hand over to my colleague Farid Yaka for the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Share my presentation. Is it okay, Lisa?
Yes, it's okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those that are in Europe. And we even have some participants, I'm sure, from North America that woke up really early to follow the workshop. My name is Farid Yakar. I work for the United Nations Environment Program. I lead work of UNEP on sustainable public procurement. Our mission as UNEP in our SPP team is to accelerate the world's transition towards more sustainable consumption and production policies and practices by supporting our member states in the implementation of sustainable public procurement and also in developing tools and solutions to enhance the performance of SPP. We work in the framework of Goal 12 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and this workshop is part of this mission. It's in the framework of the Asia Pacific GPP network, which is funded by KT, the Korean Environmental Agency. Our vision is that sustainable procurement is good procurement. This vision was proposed years back, maybe 15 years back, framework of the Marrakesh Task Force on Sustainable Public Procurement, which was led by Switzerland. It was part of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. And it was agreed by all the members of the 10 YFP. We realize periodic monitoring of sustainable procurement. Our first global review dates back from 2013. Then we had another one in 2017, and we are about to finalize the 2022 global review. In this framework, we conducted a survey of our member states, and we got like 45 responses, based on which we obtained certain data and information on the state of monitoring of sustainable procurement at global level. And the survey told us that SPP was being monitored by 66% of the governments in 2016, and this proportion rose to 71% in 2021. So we see that monitoring is progressing at world level.
Farid, apologies to interrupt you, but your presentation is no longer being shared.
Oops. Okay, thanks. I saw that there was an issue. Reshare. Is it back?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I was saying that in terms of that we do the global review, you can see the covers from our previous global reviews. And in terms of monitoring, what we found is that 66% were monitoring in 2016, and this proportion rose to 71% in 2021. Now, according to the data we collected from the registration, we found that 69% of the participants say that their organization does monitor GPP implementation. So you see that the figures are really close from what we found in the global review. And Lisa, I think we have a polling question to the participants about the monitoring of impact, because we have to distinguish monitoring of SPP, which can be about the process of implementing, it can be about the outputs, the number of contracts that are green, and about the impacts, which is very different. You know, it's the sustainability impact that SPP is creating in terms of, for example, GHG emissions reduction or creation of green jobs or limitation of hazardous contents, etc. This is what we call GPP impact, and this will be the topic of our workshop today. So the question that we have is, does your organization monitor GPP impacts? Then you have, I think, Lisa, can you explain a little bit how it will go?
In one moment, a polling question will appear on your screen. So if
Yeah.
you could just take a moment to answer it.
Okay. So thank you for taking part in the polling question. Please take another 30 seconds. We take another 30 seconds for you to fill in the question. So it's about the monitoring of GPP impact. Which is the topic of our workshop today. And Lisa, please let me know when I can go on.
I'm not sure if the polling function worked this time, I'm afraid. So perhaps we can go on without the answer. But if anybody wants to share an answer in the chat.
It worked for me. You know, I had
yeah,
popped up, window.
was the result shared with you also?
Sorry.
Was the results shared with you also?
No.
No. Okay. Then. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go on and we'll see. Okay. So.
Would you be able to share your presentation again, Farid? Thank you.
Yes. Okay, then when we ask countries what aspects are being monitored, we have three components for the monitoring of green procurement or sustainable procurement. We have the institutionalization of green procurement. So what is the process to really put in place to embed SPP policies in government? Then we have the outputs, which are the sustainable procurement activities, and we have environmental incomes, the impacts that I was talking about earlier. And here we see in the difference that there is a strong progress of the institutionalization, which moves from 37% to 63% of the respondents, the 45 countries. In terms of contracts that are being monitored, it's still at the top of the results. It's because we have 78% and we move to 84%. So it's leading in terms of component. And we have a weakness of the measurement of outcomes, which stays around 33–34% of the respondents. So we see that really the aspects that are least monitored is SPP or GPP outcomes, environmental or societal benefits. So this is critical to understand. In terms of which outcomes are being monitored, we see that environmental benefits are number one. They're followed by social benefits and then contribution to the achievement of SDGs. And we have the least monitored is economic benefits. I'm going to give you also the results of the 1271 SDG 1271 latest data collection exercise that we conducted 2 years ago. So you know that 1271 is part of Goal 12 on responsible consumption and production. And the UNEP is the custodian of SDG 12 and also 12.7, which is about promoting public procurement practices that are sustainable in accordance with national policies and priorities. And the indicator is about the number of countries that are implementing sustainable public procurement policies and action plans. So we have defined a methodology to measure this indicator, which has 6 subcomponents. So it's about, of course, the existence of an SPP policy action plan and regulatory requirements. We also see if countries have regulatory framework which is conducive to sustainable public procurement, if they deliver practical support to procurers, if they develop guidelines for the procurers, do they have a monitoring system, and what is the percentage of sustainable purchase of priority products and services. So we found that, of course, countries that were compliant, they had an SPP action plan or a policy. That's why you see a 1 there. Then in terms of legal framework, that was countries were pursuing and put in place a conducive legal framework, because we have 81.81 as score, which is each score goes from 0 to 1. So here it's a high score. Then they provide practical support, 0.65. And we have weaknesses in terms of developing SPP criteria. We have monitoring is only half of the countries. And we have the percentage of SPP is the lowest. Countries are not able to measure to what extent their public procurement is green or sustainable. We'll come back to that. In terms of overall performance of the sub-indicator E, which is on monitoring of SPP, we see that here Europe and Northern America are leading. However, Asia Pacific is doing well. It's close from the scores of Europe and Northern America in terms of monitoring GPP or SPP. And we have, first of all, in terms of component of this sub-indicator, the monitoring of the policy action plan implementation. Here we see that 64% of respondents indicated that they monitor one or more aspects of their SPP policy, and that the rate is especially high in Europe and in Latin America. And in terms of setting targets, we see that the Northern America is leading, but however, they are not then they are good in setting target. They are not good, however, that good in monitoring the achievement of the target. Asia Pacific has a score of 40% in terms of setting target, and also they monitor the target at the same proportion. In terms of monitoring the contracts, we see that Asia Pacific is leading. Why? Because they have countries of the region have a good e-procurement system, so they are able to measure the number of contracts. However, in terms of measuring the outcomes, we see that there is a big difference in all the regions except Northern America. Countries, as I said earlier, are better in measuring the number of contracts of GPP, the value of the contracts, and less in measuring the outcomes of these contracts in terms of sustainability. And now, what are the type of means used to collect GPP or SPP related data? We see that e-procurement platform are a good means. However, for the moment, countries still use surveys, self-assessment, or traditional reporting to measure green procurement or sustainable procurement, and all an information system. Now, in terms of the last sub-indicator, which is the share of sustainable public procurement, as I told you earlier, it's the weakest one. Only 27% of the respondents were able to provide data on the actual percentage of sustainable contracts awarded. And then this sustainable procurement, for those who presented an average of 8% of procurement, and the highest percentage reaching 40% for the respondents. We have, however, a high score for Asia Pacific, again, because of the existence of advanced e-procurement platforms in the region. So in terms of sub-indicator F, which is the share of sustainable public procurement, this is, as I showed earlier, the one that is least responded, which has the lowest score, because countries in general are not able to measure the rate or the proportion of green procurement in their public procurement. However, Asia Pacific is leading in the world because of the existence of good and strong e-procurement platforms. With that, I will finish and thank you and apologize for a bit of a lengthy presentation. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Farid, for your insightful global perspective. I would now like to pass the floor to Bettina Schaefer from Eco Institute, who will give you an overview of different approaches to measuring GPP impacts. Thank you, Farid.
Sharing.
Good morning. Can you hear me and see my presentation?
Yes, we can hear you and see your presentation.
Perfect. Thanks for inviting me. I will show you now some results of the work we have been doing together with my colleague Auradel for UNEP. In this monitoring, we have been coordinating this working group on monitoring sustainable public procurement that was created, I think, in 2015, more or less, so some years ago. And we have been collecting different approaches on how countries are monitoring sustainable public procurement implementation. And I will especially focus on these outcomes, what Farid said before, where we don't have so much experience and data. This is how we started with this working group. We did like a mapping of the existing approaches to monitor SPP implementation. This is like I said before, more or less from 2015, what was done at different levels, not only on national levels, also at regional and local levels, how public authorities tried to monitor sustainable public procurement implementation, and that there was a broad variety of cases, of possibilities, what to monitor, how to monitor. Farid already talked a little bit about that, institutionalization or the procurements or the environmental and social benefits. So there was also a difference, what we have seen between whether only some procurements were monitored or some product groups, or if the whole system was monitored. So this Farid told that before, institutionalization is the process. Outputs are the direct procurement activities, what you have bought or the tenders you made, and the outcomes are the environmental and social benefits. I will go over that. We also, when we did the global review in 2017, we asked for the reporting of impact measurement, and what you can see here in this list is that mostly CO2 emissions reduction or water consumption, for example, was reported as impact measurement, and also economic benefits. And in some case, or one case, let's say, in Korea, it's also the job creation that is calculated. So there are very few data available to measure the impact of SPP, and this is also related to the difficulties to get the data. Here you have just a short overview of what indicators can be used for the process or institutionalization measurement. It's not only one, it's not only about if you have a policy, it's also about if you do training, if you develop guidance, and if you do monitoring and so on. So there are a lot of different options for measuring indicators for the institutionalization. That is the same with the outputs. You can measure the number of procurements, the value of procurements, the number of products bought. That's a difference between, or not always, but sometimes it's a difference between the procurement or the tender documents and the real purchase. And also more at the, let's say, at social level, this contract or purchase with or from preferred companies. That is maybe the easiest indicator to get. And here is also the difficulty of what you are defining green or sustainable. You can see that with more detail in all the studies that have been produced by UNEP. And the outcomes, you can see here the list. This is also what has been reported in this 2017 global review, that mostly it's about greenhouse gas reduction, sometimes water savings or waste generation reduction, and cost savings. And what is less reported is this market share of eco-labeled products or number of eco-labeled products and companies. At least in Europe, I think maybe in Asia it's more based on this eco-labeled product, so there's more information on that. How to measure these outcomes? Here you can see the difficulty how to get to these results of the measurement. The direct evaluation would mean that you have to compare the products you are buying actually with the products you purchased before, and you need the detailed data of the product to calculate the environmental benefits. This is, for example, the consumption of IT equipment. So you need really the specific data of each monitor or of each unit purchased, and have to compare the consumption of the actual products with the prior products. As this is very time and energy consuming for those who have to make this evaluation, normally most approaches are using the proxy evaluation. That means it's like a standard consumption in a certain consumption class. So if you have a class A product that is better than B, so you have the standard consumption in this product class, and you are comparing standard consumptions. That means that you don't have the real data of your products, but like an approximate evaluation. And what is also used is this indirect evaluation to get the environmental performance. That would be, for example, if you have a vehicles fleet and you use the annual consumption of the fleet to calculate the environmental performance. That is also not really exact, because there are many factors that influence the consumption of the fleet, or also the conduction practices and so on. So you don't have really a value that is directly related to the purchase, but to the whole process of using the product. So here you can see it's really difficult to measure the results of this SPP outcomes. And therefore there are some examples that are on the one hand more general, like this potential benefits of implementing SPP. That there were some studies made on the cost-benefit analysis, and a global quantification. I think that we would say that this is the case of Berlin, so it's more global. What you have and how it can get a better benefit by implementing this. And what we have more is like case studies. This is the list you have here below. That means you take like a kind of business case and say how this specific case is a good example for to show the contribution of SPP to the general, let's say, society, or to the environment. Here in this case, you have case studies from Denmark. Here in this case, you have more like taking some products. This is from the Switch Asia project in China, where you calculate for some products the benefits between the green and the non-green product. Or here, this is from an European project, the GPP 2020, where different tenders were analyzed, or contracts, and then you just calculate the saving for one tender or for one procurement action, and say, I have saved like I don't know how many tons of CO2. And here what we also use, what you can see here is what we call the social maths. So you translate this result into something people maybe can understand better, like the light you need to for the football stadiums, or the number of flights you save, or whatever. This is, and then here we have a more comprehensive approach. I think Korea is really best practice in GPP impact measurement. You can see this with detail in the study on green public procurement in the Republic of Korea. What is done in the study is the presentation of Korea's methodology and the benchmark against other approaches that are, let's say, leading at the moment. You can see here the indicators that are calculated by the Korean government, by CONEPS and KT. And this is really very comprehensive compared with the other cases. That is what Farid mentioned. It's also based on this centralized online procurement system. So it means that there you really need the basis to be able to do that calculation. So in Korea, what helps is that they have this very good online information system on green products. They have the online data tracking system, and they have also additional reporting of the decentralized procurement of other organizations. So it's a very, very comprehensive system. And here you can see some of the measurement and result indicators. So they have the purchase and the green purchase and the environmental impacts in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction and environmental benefits calculated. The next case that is also in this Korea case study mentioned is from Massachusetts. It's a very interesting case also because what they are also working, I think, since 1996 on this environmental preferable products program, and now I think for 10 years they are asking vendors for reporting of their product characteristics or service characteristics. So what they are doing is trying to get this information from the vendors. That is also very, very interesting to get less burden for the procurers. And here you can see that they are also doing this social math with the results, so that you can see the effect of their approach. And they just developed, I think, recently this vendor reporting management tool. They started some years ago in the implementation, so that they get really also the results directly out of this tool, and they have less burden in this reporting. In the Korea case study, in this document, we have also this benchmarking between Korea, Japan, Massachusetts, the Netherlands, and the state of Berlin. And I would, if you're interested, I would recommend you to have a look at that. So you can see all the differences that exist in the monitoring SPP. It starts with the frequency, like Korea is doing this annually, like also Massachusetts or Japan, and there are other cases where you just do it once to see at which point you are, or but you don't have this implemented as a system. The different product categories, the different types of data gathering. The best for us, I think, is this e-procurement or this online system, but it takes time to get there. There's also differences in the definition of green, differences in how to calculate the benefits, what is the baseline for you, and differences in whether the socio-economic benefits are reported in terms of cost savings or job creation. That is, I think, only the case in Korea, as I said before. And then I would recommend you to have a look at this study. I think it's very interesting. It was done only once by the city of Vienna, and it's already 8 years ago. They did an impact analysis after 15 years of running their ÖkoKauf program. And what they did was just to combine quantitative assessments of some indicators and a qualitative description of others where they didn't have the data. So maybe we are always trying to get like the complete whole system, but if we don't have all the data, it's still good and valuable to put the results together, even it's in let's say a more descriptive way, as they did here, in mostly in the social impact categories where maybe they're not so detailed data. So I would really recommend you to also have a look at this study. I think that's very valuable, and they did a lot of work to get this data. So you also can get some inspiration what you can measure and how you can measure it. So this is all from my side. Thank you very much. And I will now try to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Thank you very much, Bettina, for your insightful and very detailed presentation. I'm sure our attendees got a lot of useful resources from it. I would now like to pass the floor to the final speaker for the first part of the webinar, Ms. Maud Fassbinder from SCOW, who will discuss methodologies for measuring CO2 emissions. Over to you, Maud.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maud Fassbinder. I work at the SCAO, which is a Dutch NGO, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the instrument that we host. It is called the CO2 Performance Ladder, but also, of course, how the CO2 Performance Ladder works in terms of carbon management, reduction, and monitoring. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Yes, I think this works fine.
Yes, it works well.
Good. So let's start with the instrument that we host. Again, it is called the CO2 Performance Ladder. And this infographics is just the CO2 Performance Ladder in a nutshell, how it works. So the Performance Ladder is a green public procurement tool, focuses on carbon reduction. And procuring parties, they can use our tool to stimulate decarbonization and innovation within companies, but also what they do on their projects and their supply chain and heavy industries. And the way it works that if a procuring party, like a government, like a ministry, if they use our tool, they then give an award advantage to companies that are sustainable. And to comply that they are sustainable, companies have to meet requirements. And those requirements, they have to do with the carbon emission and reduction of their organization or their projects, and their supply chain. So, and the stimulation in this part is a carrot and not a stick. So if they stimulate organization, that means that they give a financial award advantage to companies. So for companies, this is often a really good argument to get started or to be more ambitious in terms of sustainability and carbon reduction, because for them it's a green business case to get certified on our system. And for procuring parties like ministries, this is a really easy way to make a lot of impact. So the whole mechanism behind the CO2 performance ladders, we like to call that the power of procurement, is that the procuring party, they use their power to stimulate organizations. And we see that happening. So we see that because of the more tenders there are with the CO2 performance ladder, but also in general about SPP or GPP, the more it is stimulated, the more companies react to that and get more sustainable and reduce more carbon. The organization behind the CO2 Performance Ladder is KO, which is a Dutch abbreviation, and it stands for the Foundation for Climate-Friendly Procurement and Business. And we are an NGO, so we are independent and we are not for profit, and we work together with the procuring parties on the one hand, companies, but also a lot of experts, who are specialized in carbon management and monitoring of the impact. So, and together we manage this system. So there's a lot of there's a lot of knowledge about the instrument that we have. So the instrument is really big in the Netherlands, and it's not new. It's been around for almost 13 years. And what we see is that there's a huge growth in not only the numbers of the companies that are certified, but especially in the procuring parties that use our tool. So we also, I love monitoring, I love data. So we like to measure and monitor how often our tool is used. So we know that there are over 200 different procuring parties that use our CO2 performance ladder in tenders on a structural basis. And because they use it, we see that there are over 5,000 organizations that are certified. So there's that power of procurement again. The organizations that are certified are not only the bigger companies, almost 80% of the organizations that are certified are actually smaller to medium-sized enterprises. So this is a tool that has been around, and it's been originated in the Netherlands, in Europe. Then it's also being applied in Belgium for over 3 years. So this is a really good and standardized tool to use that is used to reduce carbon reduction. And we are now trying to disseminate our tool throughout Europe. So to explain how carbon measurement and reduction is monitored in our system, I have to explain a little bit more how our system works. To do that, it's good to make a distinction that it's not one tool, but it's actually two different kind of tools to see the performance ladder. So on the one hand, what I just explained is the green public procurement tool. And on the other hand, you can see the carbon management system. So this is the certification part. An organization can get certified when they meet requirements, and there are different levels to get certified on. So we have 5 levels, and the higher they are certified, of course, the more reduction they have, and the more award advantage they get in tenders. And to get certified, an organization has to implement a carbon management system. So that means that they have to implement a plan, do, check, act cycle, and they are yearly assessed by a third independent party. So there's an auditor coming over every year to check if a company meets their requirements. The whole institutionalization, which you heard of this morning again, is also part of the plan, do, check, act cycle. Then if you look into the requirement, and I'm very conscious of my time, so I'm going to not explain in a lot of detail, but I think for today the most important one is that they have to know what kind of emissions they are emitting. So they have to have knowledge about the carbon they are emitting and also the carbon they are reducing. So having a carbon footprint is the heart of our system. And that carbon footprint is one of the most important criteria, and that is checked and verified annually by that third independent auditor. So there's a verified footprint, and also you have reduction targets and another set of requirements. And every requirement we have is already based on international standards. So as long as the quality is good, if you already have a carbon footprint, you can implement that and apply that within our system without doing anything extra or differently. Then the levels we have. So we, as I already mentioned, we only focus on carbon reduction, so the greenhouse gas emissions, so also carbon equivalents. And there are 3 scopes to take into account. Up until level 3, if you are certified on level 3, you only have to include the scope 1 and the scope 2 emissions. And if you're not familiar with those terms, it means that they have to have knowledge about the emissions of their own organization and their projects. So it's not about the supply chain, because that's part when you take the step to go and get certified on level 4 or 5. So then you have to include the scope 3 emissions, which are the emissions of your supply chain and your sector. So now that you have a little bit of knowledge about how our system works, let's look into how you can measure carbon emissions with the CO2 performance ladder. So this part you just see here, I just mentioned, every certified company has a footprint which is verified about their organization, about their project. So every carbon performance tender they have, and also the supply chain if they are certified on level 4 or 5. Having a footprint is not enough. You have to have a good benchmark and you have to monitor on a regular basis. So in our system, that means every 6 months you have to check your progress. And again, that progress and your emissions and your carbon footprint is then checked by that auditor. And it's not enough to just do it once and then you'll be done with that. That's not possible. Having an implemented management system means continuously improvement. So that means that you have to be more aware, be more ambitious, but also that means that having better data quality. And another requirement, which I didn't mention before, is that every organization that is certified on our system, they have to be transparent about everything they do. So they have to publish everything they know. So that means publishing their footprints, publishing their life cycle assessments if they're certified on level 4 and 5, but also publishing their progress. So this is a lot of knowledge every certified company has. So then if you look into the other part of the CO2 performance ladder, so the procurement part, if we are looking in how much does a procuring party know about how much they are emitting, how much they are doing with green public procurement, what kind of instrument do they use it just once or more often, and also how much impact is then because of the usement of that tool. There are exceptions, but in general, they have no idea or they don't have that complete picture. So that's a really big difference when you are looking to what does a company know. So our Dutch government, they acknowledge that there's a knowledge gap, and they are stimulating this in several ways. We already have a manifesto, GPP manifesto, that is implemented for quite some years in the Netherlands. It works very well. Almost every local government is connected to that manifesto, but they are publishing a new manifesto, and they are especially focusing on the measurement of GPP. They also stimulate the carbon footprint and the CO2 performance ladder, and I'm gonna catch up with that in a minute. So because the companies know what they do, but the procuring parties, most often they don't know what they do, what we did in our system is we added a requirement for the companies. They have to monitor now the carbon footprint tenders, so we know that kind of data too. And then one final thing I have to mention is that whether you are a public organization or a private organization, your procurement, so the purchasing of goods and services, is actually part of your scope 3 emissions. So the example I have here from and I know it's in Dutch, but it's LCA of asphalt. If you are a Ministry of Infrastructure and you're tendering the maintenance of a road, then you have to include the asphalt supply chain. So that's actually part of your scope 3 emissions if you are the Ministry of Infrastructure. So this makes it really complicated because now you're also part of the supply chain. I'm almost done, so I just want to finish with this example. So the Ministry of Infrastructure in the Netherlands is one of the main users of our system, and it was always designed for governments to use it as a procurement tool. But since 2017, the Ministry of Infrastructure is also certified. So that's a practice what you preach kind of principle. as they are certified. They were first certified on level 3, so they have really good knowledge about how much their organization is emitting. And since last year, they are also certified on the highest level. So that also means that they have really good knowledge about how much they are emitting and how big procurement is responsible for those emissions. So having this knowledge, you can imagine you have a decent strategy which you can apply to make your whole supply chain more sustainable. And this is happening throughout the Netherlands. So it's actually stimulated by the Dutch government that all governments in the Netherlands have to imply our carbon management system, so the CO2 Performance Ladder, to monitor their emissions of their own organization, but especially their emissions of green public procurement. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Maud, for this really interesting introduction to the CO2 Performance Ladder. We now have, and thank you to all the panelists in the first part of the webinar for their interesting presentations. We have about 7 minutes to answer some of the questions that have started coming in from the attendees. So a question to any panelist that wants to respond. We have a comment here from Kai Hoffman, who writes that GHG and environmental impact calculation is mostly done for GPP awareness, but is not integrated into climate politics tools such as BUR, inventory, or NDCs, thus not included in the measurement, reporting, and verification system. Thus, the use of output on an outcome-based GPP monitoring and evaluation system is not entirely clear for some countries. Can you please elaborate? That's a question to any of the panelists. I don't know if anybody wants to take up that question.
Maybe we can start with Bettina, and then Maud can give us insight.
Can I see the question?
Can you repeat the question?
In the chat?
The question is in the chat, but I can just read it out one more time, just to give some time for it to absorb. So greenhouse gas and environmental impact calculation is mostly done for GPP awareness, but not integrated into climate politics tools. Thus, the use of output on an outcome-based monitoring and evaluation system is not entirely clear for countries. So, yeah.
Okay, there are many parts there. To what extent do we use then the GHG calculations or reductions of emissions in the climate policies, and also distinction between outputs and outcomes, I think. Okay, maybe you want to speak, Kai, to introduce your question verbally. Is Kai able to speak?
Kai is not able to use audio,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Sorry,
No.
okay. Well then, Bettina, if you can start, and I'm sure that Maud also will have insight.
Yes, well, I think he's right. That is really, we would like to be there and to have that integrated, but that is the difficulty of, I think, of this data gathering, and to really define the limits of our system, because it's we have like I think there are some interesting intents to do that, and to link climate policies and SPP or GPP policies and measurement, and what Maud has been presenting is going in this direction, and there are others, but it's really this difficulty of for the one hand, you have the data of what is yours existing, the fleet, the buildings, and so on, and on the other hand, the procurements, and there's always like a kind of overlapping between the procurement data and the building data, so it's not so easy to build up the system, and it's a challenge for the future. Yes.
Maud?
Yeah, I agree. And what we see is that there's a lot of hesitation to dive into the data, because they sort of expect to have the best data available and to achieve the perfect data set, but that's not possible if you're just starting. And you have to realize that if you are just starting with gathering these data, that's actually okay. You just have to start at some point, and then you may have to make sure that you have to improve on that data. And there's a lot of fear actually for double counting. But I have to say that if you take that step in gathering the data and monitor and trying to improve that on a continuously basis, you're doing the right thing. And then gradually you will not count double anymore, or not as much anymore. And you don't have to be that afraid about that. So just trying to start, try to make really good agreements within the supply chain or your sector, the companies you work together with. Try to standardize your methodology. That works really well, and try to make it as transparent as possible. I think having a really good database which is uniformal and which is transparent and available for everyone, hopefully also free to use, really stimulates having more knowledge and having more data. So just start at some point, and know that's okay if it's not perfect in the first moment.
And Lisa, if I can compliment. Yeah, well, thanks, Kai, for this very good question. What we found in the 2022 global review is that only 10% of the countries were making a connection between their GPP or SPP policies and NDCs, nationally determined contributions. But this means also we thought it would be lower. It means that in 10% of the cases of the NDCs, there is a mention of GPP. So this is encouraging, I think, and we're going to conduct a study before the end of the year on the connection between GPP policies in Asia and climate policies, and how GPP can contribute to lowering the carbon footprint of governments of the region. So, of course, we would be happy to associate the participants and JZ and the partners study, which will be conducted in the framework of the Asia Pacific GPP network, and also in partnership with the other networks of the regions, including GPN, PRSCP, etc. So in terms of distinction between outputs and outcomes, I think it should be pretty clear to everyone, because when we speak about outcomes, and this was mentioned by Bettina and Maud, we really speak about sustainability impacts. So either we are in the environmental area, on climate, on resource efficiency, on circularity. So we're talking about really positive environmental or negative environmental impact, or social impacts of procurement. So this is really to be distinguished from the outputs of SPP policies. And here again, I think Bettina provided the examples. Either we talk about number of contracts, value of contracts, number of units of green products purchased, etc. And this is again to be distinguished from the institutionalization, is the process of embedding sustainable procurement or green procurement in a government or in an organization. So please get back to the excellent slide that was prepared by Bettina, where these three notions are explicit. Lisa, any more questions?
I think we don't have time for more questions at this stage, but perhaps we can come back to them at the end of the webinar. So now, Farid, I'd like to pass the floor to you to introduce our panel for the second part of this session.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So we are now moving to the second part, where we will present some case studies. And we are honored to welcome distinguished speakers. Dingling will join us. She's a senior engineer from the China Environmental United Certification Center, CEC. Ms. Dingling is a senior engineer who works for CEC, and she has been in charge of work regarding green public procurement, and has been providing technical support to the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Ecology and environment in this area since 2012. We're also joined by my friend Martin Stanley, who is a senior advisor, Public Procurement Division for the Norwegian Agency for Public and Financial Management. And Martin is a senior advisor, and he's a computer scientist who has been working with public procurement for over 20 years, including both green public procurement and general management of procurement. Following a career in the computer industry, his attention switched to environmental matters. He is now engaged in making the management of procurement, from prioritizing of categories to reporting effects, more data-driven. And this is facilitated by his background in the computer industry and as a computer scientist. We have also with us Malik Benatan, who is the director from the Sustainable Consumption and Production Unit from the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation. Malik is the director of this SCP unit. As I said, he has been for more than 22 years leading the work of developing green public procurement in Malaysia. He will share with us his precious experience. Sanjay Kumar is also joining us, and I think that most of you know him. He is the Chief Materials Manager of Indian Railways, and he's also the President of the Asia Pacific Roundtable for Sustainable Consumption and Production. He has over 2 decades of governance and leadership experience in public policy, procurement, and sustainability. His vision, leadership, and dedicated effort has been pivotal for the growth of sustainable purchasing movement in the region. He's currently leading the interest group on sustainable procurement in the construction and infrastructure sector of the One Planet Network SPP program. And I should mention that he has also been recently publishing a book entitled Understanding Sustainable Public Procurement, Reflections from India and the World, which was edited by Springer Nature in Germany, and which is the first comprehensive book on sustainable public procurement, providing in-depth analysis on the origins, nature, and reality of the implementation of sustainable purchasing. And last but not least, we're joined by Ashley Mclennan from the ECO Institute. Ashley is a researcher in the Products and Materials Flow Division of the ECO Institute. She focuses on sustainable product policy, in particular SPP policy. She has been involved in several projects in Europe, Southeast Asia, focusing on building the capacity of policymakers and procurers and enhancing institutional support for sustainability within both local and national governments. She worked previously with ICLE, where she supported the European Commission Help Desk for Green Public Procurement, as well as contributing to its guidance and training programs on the topics of green, circular, and socially responsible procurement. So really an amazing panel that we have with us today. And without further ado, I will now hand over to, first of all, our representative from China, Ms. Ling Ding from the CEC. Over to you, Ms. Ling Ding. Please, you should unmute, maybe. We see your screen, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, well, very clear.
Okay.
Loud and clear, thank you.
Mm.
And if you could go into the presenter's mode.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon, good morning and afternoon. Can you hear me? And can you?
Yeah, if you can just switch to the presenter's mode, the presentation. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, no problem.
Okay， 那我不能放是吗？ Okay. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I'm Ding Ling from China Environmental United Certification Center. Today, I will introduce the GPP monitoring and sustainable impact of GPP in China. The first about GPP monitoring in China. GPP in China. GPP 你看不到我这个吗？ GPP monitoring in China is divided into two levels. One is the national. Oh, sorry. 为什么呀？不能这样放吗？我只能这样放是吗？嗯。
Yes, can you share again?
Yeah,
Yes.
but
Okay. Okay, that's
okay.
fine. Just go to. Can you go to presenters mode?
Oh yes, I think I only share this PPT. Yes.
No problem.
Oh, okay. GPP monitoring in China is divided into two levels. One is the national government procurement, and the other is local government procurement. Two sets of government procurement information systems are used respectively, but the data of the two systems are finally consolidated by the Ministry of Finance. Each year, the MOF collects and analyzes data from the both systems. In the two systems, the relevant policies of GPP are embedded. The main contents of the systems include procurement quality and amount, master is bidding or centralized address, whether the procurement is EL products or energy saving products, whether the supply is small and medium-sized enterprises. This is because of the policy of receiving shares for SME. The system includes goods, services, and more than 4 million in engineering purchase. Although the project procurement of more than 4 million yuan is required to comply with the law of the People's Republic of China on tendering and bidding, according to the requirement of the regulation on the implementation of government procurement. The project procurement of the more than 4 million yuan should also implement the government green procurement the GPP related policies. Of course, the information systems is only one of the GPP monitoring, as well as the routine inspection and so on, are also the way of the monitoring. According to the data released by the MOF of China in 2021, the priority to purchase EL products nationwide reached 81 billion yuan in 2020, according to 85% of procurement of the products categories. The second is sustainable impacts of GPP in China. Many from the four aspects of China of environment and innovation and sources including purchase and consumers. The first about environment is sustainability impacts. Chinese GPP has made a positive contribution to addressing climate change. According to the statistics on the government procurement data from some local government environmental labeling practices. From 2016 to 2020, the carbon dioxide emissions reduction of desktop computers and laptop purchase was 1.8 million tons, amount to the encompassing of 119,000 hectares of forest. The VOC of office furniture purchased by the government of environmental labeling practices in recent 5 years were reduced by 149,000 tons. It amounted to 5% of annual VOC emissions of Chinese petrochemical industries. Out of about 4,000 tons of COD have been reduced for corporate papers. In the innovation, GPP encourages enterprises to actively innovate protection and management technologies, so as to reduce the waste of raw materials, the use of organic chemical in the production process, and the emissions of carbon and other pollutants. In the social aspect, first, GPP promotes the green consumption of enterprises when purchasing raw materials. Enterprises also take green practices as the main factor. According to the relevant investigation reporters, more than 16% of enterprises will correlate the sustainable development of green procurement into specific indicators and add them to the evaluation of a procurement purpose. On them, 16% of of enterprises of quality in the indicators of green procurement. The other is promote the ordinance of consumers. Although GPP is government occasion, in the people in charge of GPP and its implementation have formed the annual awareness of purchasing green practices in their work, become green conscious consumers, and then drive the people around them. According to the 2019 surveys of Chinese green consumption status, consumers' awareness of Chinese environmental labor has risen to 17%. 82% of the respondents are willing to pay the same or even higher prices to China environmental labeling safety practices. Now, I introduce a case about the impact of GPP on sustainability. In 2020, MEE and MOF issued the government procurement demand standard for competitive paging. The standard isn't aimed at the purchase practices, but one link is to all government procurement activities. The standard is no mandatory standard. The standard mainly requires the selection of raw materials and the control the chemical and the reduce the use of rare materials. Last month, we conducted an electoral questionnaire service on the implementation of the standard, and more than 4,000 widely questionnaires were collected. 17% of the purchasers said they had implemented the standard and use them as substantive quantitations in the bidding process, such as bonus portings. And 63% of purchasers took the standard as part of the contract and expected it. From this case, we can see that green procurement and green contribution has already excited and as everyone's potential always, and this impacting will continue to excite and expand. Now, it is my interest that GPP is practiced in China. Thank you.
Thank you, Dingling, for this very interesting presentation, and congratulations for the excellent and encouraging results of GPP in China, including in the measurement area. And now we're going to move to a different continent and, of course, different country, with Martin, who's going to tell us about the experience of Norway in measurement of sustainable and green procurement. Thank you. Norway, Martin, over to you. And if you could turn on your camera. Martin, we see your presentation, but we can't hear you. Lisa, can you hear Martin?
I can't hear Martin either. I've sent him an unmute request. Perhaps he has an internet problem.
Well, but at least we see his presentation.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, good. If we could see you, it would be even better.
Yeah, I can't get the WebEx.
It's okay, then just keep the mic open. It's all right. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry about the slight technical problems.
No worries.
I'm going to give some short words about what's happening in Norway. First, some general comments about our general approach, and we've been hearing a certain amount about where to measure. We're using the UNDP RBM sort of mechanism for measuring, and our main measuring is occurring around about what we call outcomes, which is basically measuring behavioral changes in the procurement environment. I mean, people are buying it and what they're buying and how they're changing that. And to a certain extent, then we try and measure what the environmental impacts are from that. At the moment, our major focus is on climate change. That's the big push in our country. And when we're doing measurement, we try and think about that we're measuring for 5 different groups. So we're trying to do the measurement sort of algorithms such they can satisfy the central government's need for better data about what's happening on the environmental side, especially climate side. Our own management in my organization, the agency, so that we can prioritize our activities and make new activities go as more as efficient as possible and cut out things which don't have an effect. The procurement officers out in the field, they need data as well as in order to manage their own procurement. The population in general, and also providing data for research and business. The way we provide data to these 5 different groups is obviously different because of GDPR, I mean, the sort of information limitations, but the basic building blocks should be as much as possible the same. We're trying to use existing data as much as possible. It's not necessarily procurement data, it can be lots of other data. I'm going to give you some examples a little bit later. And we're trying to minimize the amount of reporting that has to be done explicitly by other people. So we're trying to sort of follow up, trying to cut down the administrative burden. We're using a centralized data lake so as to collect data into one place, because we're finding very often that by putting different data sets together, we can get new information which was not possible before. And we're doing the ingestion, transforming, and joining, and this visualization as publicly as possible So we're trying to put it out onto the net so that we can get interest from the outside world, and using Tableau Public as basis for this. At the moment, a lot of the data is very coarse data. It's not very precise, but we're trying to move down to fine-grained data as time goes on. So now I'll give you 4 quick examples of how this works. The first one is a procurement overview. It's very coarse data to try and help organizations find out where the climate or the carbon footprint of their procurement is worse. Let's say it's the biggest. And we call this a spend analysis, a sort of climate spend analysis. So the goal is to help organizations prioritize their climate reduction activities. And the questions which we address then for them is which categories are responsible for most of our climate emissions, and what is the climate footprint of our organization, type of questions we're trying to answer. The data sources are spend data from the central government accounting system, and climate intensity data, CO2 equivalent per euro from environmentally extended MRIO models. So that's basically economic data, and then organizational data from the public sector, number of employees. The data product we provide out is online open visualizations, which include benchmarking possibilities. So they can compare different organizations against each other. That's why we need a number of employees. The challenges, of course, it does not take into account the specific products of the suppliers. This is a general sort of planning to strategy tool, very coarse planning tool, and it's bad at measuring effects of measures taken. In fact, one can have an effect that if one puts environmental criteria, the prices can go up, which means it looks as if the climate emissions increase. So it's not a good product for following things up, but it's good for finding where the emphasis should be put. Typical output will look like this. This is on the net at the moment, and there's a link of where you can find it is at the bottom, where we're comparing 2 different organizations here, and what both their costs are and what their estimated environmental climate load is. So, second example, we have a big activity going on trying to get procurers to buy zero-emission vehicles whenever possible. That's a decision which has been made by government for implementing climate policy, going generally on the whole of the pool. But the problem is that it takes time to get this implemented, because of charging limitations and geography and climate and that kind of things. So the questions we're trying to help people with is for the procurers to try and plan how they can do a transfer over to zero-emission vehicles as quickly as possible. They need to know what vehicles they have and what will be the climate effect of replacing different vehicles. And we need information as to who's still buying fossil vehicles and why they're doing it. So we've implemented this by fetching data from car registrations and the company register. We joined these 2 data sets together to find out all cars that are owned by public authorities and what they're buying. And we can visualize this in 2 ways. One, for the contracting authorities, so they get lists over which cars they own and how old they are and that type of thing. And we can get an overview of the whole country. We're also putting in a new data collection here that when they buy non-zero emissions, they will have to report why they've done this so that we can get more data about what other problems out there for them not buying zero emission. And this is a sort of output we get from that as the overview for the different of the country with the different local authorities and what penetration they have of zero emission. And we can also do benchmarking on the different sectors, central government, local government, private enterprises, and that kind of thing. Third example is more textual, looking for environmental clauses in a request for tender. That's more the traditional. Are they requiring climate requirements when they're making their RFTs? The question is, how often are they doing this? The way we do this is we're fetching competition documents that are openly available from one of the major suppliers of procurement software. We collect this into data lake and then doing automatic text analysis on these requests for tenders, so as to recognize specific terms, so as to see how the development is going there. Fourth example which is again completely different. We're trying to see how we can reduce climate emissions from due to travel. So the goal here is to help organizations reduce the carbon footprint of due to travel. And the questions to be addressed then is, what is the climate impact of our due to travel? And for many organizations at the departmental level. And in fact, some organizations now are beginning to plan their due to travel within climate budgets, so that each department will get a climate budget and will have to organize their due to travel within those budgets. Here we're using completely different data source. We're using data which has been connected by the 2 travel agencies that have framework agreements for the state sector. The advantage with using them to do that is that we don't get any data connected to individual persons, because we get data sent over from them to us for analysis, but they take away the personal information, because we have very strong regulations about GDPR limitations on data moving. So then they can get detailed visualizations for each organization directly from the travel agencies, where they get the personal data, whereas we get travel data from them to us, so that we can then do analysis on the climate emissions from state travel. We're looking at developing a budgeting tool. The challenge here does not take into account specific flight details. So it's based on, at the moment, it's based on averages on different legs. So, and that will look something like this. It's at the moment in the development stage, with the possibility of going in and seeing who's flying where, how much they're flying, and that kind of thing, and total climate emissions on the left-hand side. So our experience is basically that climate accounting is a very major driver. We're moving from document analysis and text analysis more to looking at actual behavior of procurers. And by procurers, it's not just procurement officers, but also the people doing the ordering. And our general experience also start with what questions need to be answered. I mean, to try and find out where in a decision-making process one needs to have better data, and then to try and find good enough data. And very often that means that one has to have good knowledge of the category one's working with or the market. We're putting more and more including data requirements into contract clauses. Saying that one of the parts of the deliveries from the suppliers is not just the products, but also data about the climate effect of the products. Collecting data in central storage so that it can be reused and then reanalyzed is definitely it's an investment to begin with, but we're already seeing benefits from that. What we're really missing now is we need to harmonize the way the product-specific climate data is provided by suppliers. At the moment, there's lots of different methods, LCAs and EPDs and PRs and lots of different things. But how do we get this harmonized so that it becomes easier for procurement officers to use the data? Okay, thank you for your attention. I hope somebody else can take away the sharing, because I can't.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this thorough and very interesting presentation of the Norwegian experience. Now we're going to go back to Asia with the presentation from Malik on the Malaysian experience of impact measurement of GPP. Over to you, Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Periaker. So I'm Malik from Malaysia. So okay, good morning and good afternoon. I'm Malik from Malaysia. So I would like to share with you about the GPP monitoring and evaluation system in Malaysia. So actually, this is our background of GDP in Malaysia. So when we mentioned, we have starting as one of our strategy to achieve. Okay, and then actually in Malaysia, we have 5 years plan. So
Sorry, Malik, it's breaking up. Can't hear you very well.
okay,
Can improve.
can you?
Now we can, but it's on and off.
Something.
Yeah, please go on and see.
Okay. For your permission, in Malaysia, we have the 5 years plan. So actually in 11 Malaysia plan starting from 2016 until 2020. So we have the target of GDP and lose 20% by the government. And in 12 Malaysia plan, so starting from 2021 until 2025, so actually we have the target for GDP. So we increase the number from 20% to 25%. Okay, actually this GGP implementation in Malaysia. So we started in 2013 with the pilot project, and during the pilot project we select 5 ministry and the 6 product group, and then we increase the number from 6 to 20 product group until 40 product in 2020, and we increase the number of ministry from 5 to 12, and then by 2020, so all the ministry in the federal government already implement the GDP. So actually, for information, we start in the federal government in Malaysia, and then starting last year, so we will expand the GP to the state government and also the local activity. So actually, we would like to achieve our target 25% by 2025. Okay, for the GGP monitoring, evaluation, and reporting in Malaysia, so actually, we select the report based on 40 product group in our GGP guideline 3.0. So each ministry will submit the annual reporting to MOM and also the MDTC. And MDTC will consider all the report and also the performance. And GGP performer will be presented to our GGP working and steering committee. So for your mention, so this is the data that we require from the ministry. So we have the 14 parameters that they should submit to MDTC and also the MOF. So for example, like name of department or agency, category of procurement, either product, service or consultant, and then the total year budget allocation. So actually the total GDP value, number 4, and then number 5, they must give the GDP value for each procurement. And then category of GDP product group, quantity of product group, for example, how many items they buy, for example, like ICT or paper. And then the brand model for each product, and then price per unit, energy use actually for the electrical product. And then number 11, name of supplier, origin of product, service and consultant. And then we have the, they can provide the information of the environmental criteria and so the evidence for the green product, for example, like label certification or test report. Actually, this is our GDP achievement until year 2020. So information actually we must achieve 20% performance from 2020. For information, the GP value for year 2013 until 1. Actually, the value is based on procurement of product and services only. So actually, this is the list of the top 50. So where we can see the highest is about the ICT equipment. So most of the ministry in Malaysia, they buy the ICT under the GP. So we can see the percentage about 37.7%. And then the second about the solar energy, third rubber-based product. Port, paper, and then paint and coating, and then cleaning services, building facility management services, multi-purpose printer, catering, and so the data until the clean data center. Actually, this is the top 15. And then for your mention, so we also analyze a few impact of the GDP. So we select two product group. Okay, number 1, we select the ICT equipment. You can see actually we identify about the 5 brands for the ICT. So actually we have the brand AA, BB, CC, DD, and EE. So actually we have the number of item purchase. For example, like the brand ICT AA. So we buy about the 419 units. So the GP value is about in ringgit Malaysia. So we can see the energy saving in kilowatt for every item. And then we can see the energy saving for the in the ringgit Malaysia. And then for the energy saving in kilowatt, we can convert to the CO2 emission reduction in kilogram CO2. So you can see all the brand. So we have the identified the 5 brand. So each brand already have the energy saving in kilowatt, and also they have the impact in the CO2 emission reduction. So you can see the total is about the 3,700 unit. Then we can see the GDP value is about the 15 million, and then we can see the energy saving in ringgit Malaysia is about the 200,000 per year, and then we can see the CO2 emission about the 392 kilogram CO2. And then the second product is about the multi-purpose printer. So actually, we already identified the 8 brand of multi-purpose. Have the list of how many items already purchased. So you can see the brand of AA is about the 559. The GP value is about the 1 million, and then there is energy saving in kilowatt, and then we can convert to the energy saving, and also we can convert to the CO2 emission reduction in kilo CO2. So we can see all the brand. It's about the 8 brand. So they have the impact to the energy saving in kilowatt, and also the impact to the saving in Malaysia, and also the impact to the CO2 emission reduction. So I think that's all information about the GPP.
Thank you very much, Malik, for this presentation, and good to see the progress achieved by Malaysia on green government procurement, and especially on the measurement of impact of GGP. Now, without further ado, I'm going to switch to India and hear from our friend Mr. Sanjay Kumar from Indian Railways, and also who is also the president of the Asia Pacific Roundtable on Sustainable Consumption and Production. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Farid. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Yeah, great. So let me share the presentation. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and good evening as well to the people who are joining from the Southeast Asia. So in another 10 minutes, I am going to talk about how do we were able to monitor the purchase from the micro and small industries in India. If you look at the SMEs sector around the world, they are central to achieve the environmental sustainability and inclusive growth. Because they play a key role in the national economies around the world. If you look at the emerging countries like India, they constitute roughly about 33% of the GDP in emerging economies, and they also contribute to the large sum of the exports which India does. And in terms of their ability to create employment, they are able to create employment per unit of investment much more than as compared to their counterparts, other large industries. In OECD countries, they roughly constitute 70% of the employment, and in emerging economies, again, it's a large chunk, 45% of the employment generation in these countries. MSEB, if you look at they are small industries and they have a small footprint, but if you put all SMEs together, their footprint again becomes very large, and it's very important and very critical for any transformation of economy on a green path. So SMEs, they are the key, and with all these aims, we thought of how we can leverage the SME procurement from the SME to transform our economy and also benefit in terms of employment generations and greening our economies. So with all this aim, in 2006, we came up with the Act, and the Act provided for, classification of enterprises, and the objective was to facilitate promotion, development, and competition of SME among SMEs. Apart from many other things, like the procurement preference policy, which I would like to talk and continue, and it also provided for the dispute resolution, timely payment, credit facilities, skill development, and so on. So since 2006, when the Act was passed, until 2012, when the MSE order was issued, nothing much happened during that period. But this order was very pivotal, for including the MSME in the procurement of public procurement in governments of India. So the order provided for minimum 20% mandatory procurement from MSME from 2015 onwards. Now it has been amended, and now it has been made 25%. And a sub-target of 5% procurement from SMEs owned by scheduled castes and scheduled tribes entrepreneurs. SC, STs in India are historically disadvantaged section of the societies, so there was a provision for them as well. And now this has been amended, and now it says 4% for the SC, ST and 3% for the women. So that women, entrepreneur can also participate in the economic activities, and they can contribute to the sustainable development in India. And the order also provided a price preference of 15% to the MSME vendor. That means even if MSME vendor is not the lowest, they can be asked to match the price of the lowest bidder, and they can be given the award of the contract. Again, various other things like vendor development program, buyer seller meets, deployment of e-procurement, reservation of 350 items for procurement from the MSME, and so on. So when the first cycle came for the reporting, there were a lot of weaknesses in the sense some of the organizations, they choose not to report at all. And in some organizations, they reported the data, but some of the data were missing. Like they were reporting for the supply contact, but they were not reporting for the works contact or for the services contact. Some of them, they did not report on the subcontracting, how much subcontracting they are doing once the award is given to any, any unit, any vendors. And there was a diversity in data reported by the unit because, there was not a standard format which was provided in the beginning. So based on this experience, before the second reporting period started in 2013-14, there were several changes were made. And these are, again, the process indicator which all the government units, ministries, departments, and public sector undertakings, they were asked to submit this data in the format provided by them. So all the confusion of the first, reporting period, that was closed. So again, total number of order placed by each unit in numbers and value, total number of order placed with the AMSU, so that we are able to find out the percentage, what percentage of purchase order is going to MSME in terms of number and in terms of value. And again, there was indirect, total number of MSME vendor registers, because that also indicates how the MSMEs are actually participating in your procurement system. So again, Fahid also talked, and many other speakers also spoke about, like, it's very important that how do we integrate, data collection exercise with the e-procurement system, right? So I'm giving one of the example of Indian Railway, how they did it. And they, in a similar manner, other ministries and departments also, they did it with the linkage of the, MSME procurement with the organization. So at the time of registration itself, the vendor are prompted to indicate whether they are MSME, medium or large, or non-MSME, and so on. And again, at the time of, when they are quoting, they are participating in the bid, again, they are asked, to submit. If you are MSME, then from which category you are? Like, are you owned by, the women, or whether the ownership rests with the SC, ST entrepreneur, and so on. So that the system is able to capture the data. And based on that, during the second reporting period, this was the percentage. Total procurement from MSMEs was roughly about 15.3% in 2012-13, and 13-14 it increased hardly to some small 15.3% again, right? In specific to railway, it was very low, right? If you consider percentage from the MSE 5.8% and 2013-14% 6.6%. But as we progress, we understood that monitoring is very important. So at a very high level, the monitoring of the progress of different PSUs and different ministries, was instituted. And at the highest level, the cabinet secretary used to monitor the progress of this policy on a 6-monthly basis, and that helped. That helped in the sense, now if you look at, I'm skipping a few intervening periods from 2018 to 2000 and jumping to 2021 and 2022. Well, but I will come back with those figures as well. Now, if you look at, now we are able to capture the data reported by 128 central public sector and enterprises. So how much is the procurement by the CP SCB, right? So total value is this. Then again, procurement from MSE, including SC and ST, is so many. How many MSMEs are getting benefited out of these procurement policies? There are so many. Again, in terms of percentage, how many MSMEs owned by SC/ST people? So that this is so much of the value and so much is the percentage. And how much is the procurement from the women MSMEs? That is the MSME owned by the women entrepreneurs. So this is so much, and this is the percentage. And again, how many women MSME benefited during the year? So this was. So now you have a system in place where we are able to capture all the data and online, and weekly report can be accessed by anyone, which is available on the websites. So if you look at the the percentage of procurement from MSMEs during the last 5 years, in 2018-2009 it was roughly about 26.32%, and now it is slowly it is increasing, and all due to the monitoring at the highest level, right? And facilitating the data collection from different ministries and public sector undertakings.
Okay, if you could conclude, Sanjay.
Yeah, I'm concluding. This is my last slide. So the key learning is political supports play a huge role. Like if the monitoring is the highest level, definitely the the people who are responsible for actions, they put a lot of effort, and they are able to give the data. Second is mandatory requirements. Making a mandatory reporting requirement with a clear instruction is very important, because once you make it a mandatory, naturally it becomes part of the reporting system, and people report and you get a good result. And there is a need to ensure consistent and comparable data for benchmarking, because unless you have a consistent and comparable data, you will not be able to benchmark different ministries and different organizations based on the what is their achievement. And finally, as has been said by many speakers, integration of integrated e-procurement system is vital for establishing monetary system. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for this very interesting presentation, and congratulations for the establishment of this monitoring system. And good to see that also one lesson learned could be also that the monitoring system itself induces progress in implementation. We see the switch and the progress of monitoring from when you started putting in place a strong system, and how itself it motivated, I think, the organizations to procure more from SMEs. Thanks a lot. And now I think we're ready to move to Berlin and to hear Ashley present the experience of the city of Berlin and the support OCO provided to that. Thank you.
Oops.
Over to you,
Yes.
Ashley.
Good morning from Europe. Good afternoon to Asia. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm going to be presenting a study that some colleagues of mine did back in 2015 for the city of Berlin. And the purpose of this study was to calculate the potential economic and environmental savings. So it's a slightly different methodology, looking into the future and what could be achieved by GPP. And yeah, this was led by my colleague Jens Groger. And what they did was they identified 15 product groups and services with high environmental and cost relevancy. And they compared one conventional and one environmentally compatible product. So this used the CO2 impacts from the use phase. And it's important to emphasize that only the use phase was used in this estimation. This was the pragmatic approach because it takes a lot of resources to calculate a full life cycle impact, and that went beyond the resources that we had available for the study. So that's pragmatic, but it does mean that the environmental impacts might be underestimated because the resource extraction phase, the manufacturing phase, and the disposal phase of product use are also very also have high CO2 impacts and sometimes a lot higher than the use phase. The exceptions to this were paper, where water and wood consumption was calculated, cleaning agents, where critical dilution volume was calculated, and then construction machinery, where the soot particle emissions and the local air pollution was also of interest. Then once these comparisons were available, the savings from procuring a green product compared to a conventional product were extrapolated according to the public procurement volume of Berlin. So I'll go into a bit more detail about the methodology we used rather than the results, but I'll show some of the results as well as I go through. So first of all, the product selection phase. This was done based on procurement volume, the environmental relief potential, and the cost relief potential. So looking at these variables, this list of 15 products with high relevance to GPP was selected. And for each of these, a conventional product was identified. That was a state-of-the-art product, which was identified using market reviews and the eco-design guidelines, and as well as using consumer portals. So looking for the best available non-green products and comparing these to an environmentally compatible alternative. So this was identified using GPP criteria where they were already available, or products that met the Blue Angel eco-label, which is the German eco-label for sustainable products and services. Next slide. So the calculation of the life cycle costs, as I mentioned, was focused on the use phase for most products. So that included the purchasing price, the energy costs needed in the running of the product or service, the recurring costs of the service, so the maintenance costs in particular, the cost of consumables like water use, and the disposal costs were also included for most of the products. The period that the life cycle costs were based on the AFA table, which is the depreciation table used by the public sector in Germany, and the annual costs were calculated using the net present value method. That was used because it takes into account the time value of the money. So basically meaning the money that would be lost if by spending it up front instead of investing it with the interest that would then be accrued. As an example of what what came out of the calculation, I've taken the office lamps. In this case, office fluorescent lamp was compared to an LED light. And as you can see, the purchasing costs of the LED light back in 2015 were much more expensive than the fluorescent lamp, but the efficiency of the LED light source was higher, the power consumption was lower, the lifetime of the lamp was much, much longer, and that also resulted in less maintenance costs. And if we look at the results, you see that annually this led to cost savings because of the reduced maintenance costs and the lower energy costs, and also led to CO2 savings. And again, this is a CO2 savings from the use phase only. So for each of the products, when we then had this difference between the conventional product and the green product, the overall CO2 saving was extrapolated using estimates of the annual Berlin procurement volume. The reason why estimates were used was because there actually was no statistical data available on the total amount of products being purchased each year in the city of Berlin. So instead, this had to be estimated using measures such as the number of employees. So that would tell you how many computers were needed, for instance, the net floor space of properties. So that helps calculate the amount of lighting required or the amount of green electricity required. And then also where available, inventory figures were used, which give a much more accurate measure of how many assets are currently owned by the city of Berlin. And overall, savings of 355,000 tons of CO2 per year were estimated. When you look at the savings over all of the product groups, you can see that not all product groups led to cost savings. So down here in the bottom, the red bars are the product groups where green public procurement led to higher life cycle costs, in particular for electricity, but also construction machinery and commercial waste. But overall, the life cycle savings that could be achieved through buildings and street lighting, office lighting, and some other categories here were so high that the overall cost savings, it was still cheaper when green public procurement was applied across the board. So that was overall savings of 38 million euros per year. Just for some further information about this study, including the methodology, you can find these studies only available in German, but they can be translated using Google or DeepL. And then also the tables that we developed for this study were then used by the Environmental Agency in Germany for a general life cycle cost tool, which can be used by any public authority. The costs in there are based on German electricity costs and so on, but with a bit of tweaking could also be very helpful in your own national context. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and it was a pleasure hearing from the other speakers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for this still very interesting presentation, even though it dates back from a few years back, but very useful. Do you think the results would have changed a lot if we had taken into consideration the full life cycle?
Yes, absolutely. The life cycle costs in the production phase of some goods and services are the biggest costs. So take computers, for instance, the manufacturing impacts are much higher where the energy efficiency of the use phase is already very high. So these CO2 estimates are really, I would say, an underestimate, and we can assume that a much higher impact was achieved.
And do you know if Berlin has plans to revise the study, update it?
No, I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. We'll send the information to everyone if we find out.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. With your presentation, we end the series of presentations, and we're now ready to move to the Q&A discussion for a few minutes. Lisa, if you could maybe read out any questions we have, and I'm not able to access the
Sure.
chat.
We have a question from Malik Atan. Question from Chayod, who wants to ask clarification about the GPP report. It shows green products and services, but does it include green work?
I think, thank you, Mr. Chaya, for this question. So actually, at the moment, our reporting is based on product and services only. For the GPP works, it's not yet implemented in Malaysia. So actually, we are in progress to implement GDP work by next year. That's my answer.
Thank you, Malik.
Yep.
A question for Sanjay. You mentioned that the price preference is 15% in India. Do you know which country has the highest price preference?
Sorry, I'm not aware about how other countries are giving the price preference and they are using it. But this is definitely something of interest, and I will try to find the answer about it and maybe communicate it later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my experience and knowledge, to my knowledge, we're around 15% in all the cases that I've seen in terms of margin of preference for SMEs. Public procurement. Maybe other speakers have a view on this. Okay, no, please go ahead, Lisa.
Sure. Yeah, we have a question left over from part one. Suhana Shamshuddin asks, how does green products price and availability impact green purchasing behavior? So question to any panelists that would like to respond and comment on that. The question is, how does green products price and availability impact green purchasing behavior?
Should I go ahead?
Ashley, you want to go?
I could say that it has a huge impact on green purchasing behavior because even though you can achieve savings over time, this can be difficult to calculate upfront when you're comparing bids, and it requires tools and training and different processes from the usual lowest cost comparison. So this is a big barrier, perhaps one of the biggest barriers to GPP, and is why things like life cycle costing can be so powerful in making advancements here.
Any other contribution from speakers on this point? Martin?
I think that another point which also comes up is sometimes that the economic situation of the purchasing authority doesn't allow them to invest the high cost initially to take the savings in the long term. It all depends on what budgeting systems they have. And we're noticing this a lot with electric cars, for example, where there may be a higher initial cost and a lower running cost. Who is going to cover the investment in between?
Yes, my experience also, I would like to point to the fact that we have to see things in a dynamic way. Paying a premium for at the beginning ensures that there is then a reaction from the market. Market adapts, and there is more investment going into the production of the more expensive goods, even though, as Ashley it was said before, in Maud said, in terms of life cycle costing has to be taken into consideration. But regardless of that, paying more ensures that there is a reaction from the market. There is more than capacity to produce. And in the end, what we see is that prices go down, the prices of the greener options. We've seen that on paper. And some of you may remember that paper, recycled paper or greener paper, was maybe 20-25% more expensive than normal conventional paper, and now the prices are identical or at par. We've seen that on medical gloves, for example. It was 7 times more expensive. Now it's equivalent. So please remember that we have to look at things in a dynamic way, that we have to send a consistent signal, strong signal to the market. And then what we see is that the market adjusts and the costs go down. So things are not, when you look at things in terms of take a snapshot at a certain time, okay, you see a difference, but over time things change. There's a dynamic reaction in the market which leads to a decrease of the price. Any other question?
Yeah, we've had 2 questions so far about the challenges that import-driven countries face. So we have a question about if a country is import-driven, how to really validate the necessary documents primarily to vet the eco products. So yeah, how can import-driven countries validate the necessary documents to vet eco products? And the other question about import-driven countries was about how practical is GPP for these countries if they cannot dictate criteria to manufacturers? So yeah, perhaps speakers could answer those 2 questions in one answer.
Maybe I should jump in on the first part of this. We're having a lot of discussions about getting climate data from suppliers, for example. And this question is coming up very quickly as how do we harmonize the climate data across different countries? And here the EU is working at least on doing a lot of work on this at the European level with these product environmental footprints type of systems. But it's certainly the answer is not there yet. But one's going to have to work more on harmonization. I mean, there's a lot of basic techniques there, like these EPDs, for example. But the PCRs, which are the basis of the EPDs, are not harmonized. So yeah, we're not quite there yet. But I think the market, the public market is so big that if we can start putting the requirements in as part of the contract requirements, then we can get the market to harmonize through market demand rather than necessarily from government intervention directly.
Okay, on this question also of the import-driven countries, I think that's a major topic because countries don't want green procurement to lead to an increase of imports over local production. So that's why when UNEP goes into a country, we do what we call prioritization of product groups, and we make sure that the selected products do not have a negative impact on local production. That's very important. Then there is also the issue of availability, because many countries don't have in their local production the potential of producing those greener options. So we had the example in many countries, we selected some greener categories, and the market was not, the products were not available on the market. So again, there we have to look at things in a dynamic way. It's important that the government signals to the market that it will start purchasing greener or more sustainable options over a period of 2, 4 years, 5 years, so that the market adjusts. And this happened in Morocco, for example, where now we have greener options, whereas 5 years back didn't have those on the market in terms of paper, cleaner products, or IT. So it's again, as I said, important to send harmonized, consistent, and strong signals to the market.
Yeah, and may I come in?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So it also depends on the country, like how they do approach the green public procurement, or I will call it sustainable public procurement, and in which area they would like to focus on, right? Say for example, for many countries like who are stretched on the budget, and mostly the countries who are which are in transition to development, they have a limited budget and spending money for them in the initial period may not work out. So why don't those countries, they can start approaching the sustainable public procurement, identifying a social issues, which is closer to their people requirements, like the minimum wages, like the, the working hours, like the rights of the women's, you know, equal payment. Start with those issues which are closest to the heart and where the political leadership, they have the acceptability of the concept. Once you start and they start accepting the concept of public procurement in transforming those aspects, slowly then move on to the other criteria like greener criteria. So I think country needs to identify, what is the most important to them and what is doable at that point of time. The things which are doable in India may not be doable in Europe, or the things which are doable in Europe that may not be doable at the same time in India. So we have to work it out on ourselves and we have to decide. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay, for mentioning not only we can work on the categories, but we can work also the sustainability objectives. So
Yes.
as Sanjay said, or favor, for example, some social aspects, and then switch to the environmental then parameters or objectives. That's also another possibility, because in the end, we need to get the buy-in from the decision makers, and we need to show that procurement can be a strategic tool, which is not accepted everywhere and understood everywhere. Thank you. Do we have last question?
Mr. Perin, okay.
Yes,
Malik
please,
from
please,
Malaysia.
Yes.
So I would like to respond for the question for the imported product. So in Malaysia, how we validate the product from other countries? So actually, in Malaysia, we have established the green recognition scheme for product. So actually, we have the My Hijau mark. So how we recognize the product as a green? So actually, we can recognize the certification not for Malaysia, we also recognize from other countries. So actually, our recognition scheme, we follow the UNEP guideline. So as long the product comply one of 4 category, for example, like they have the type 1 eco label, for example, like from Germany, from EU, so they can be registered in our directory and can be registered in Malaysia. So second category, as long they have the type 3 eco label, for example, like they have the carbon. And then the third category, as they have the BSS, voluntary sustainable scheme, for example, like energy saving, water saving, so they can register in our directory, can be recognized in our My Hijau mark system or scheme. And the last one, if the product doesn't have any green certification, but they comply with the environmental standard. So either the standard from Malaysia or other country, so they can recognize in our My Hijau mark directory. So if anybody want to know detail about the My Hijau mark, so they can browse to our website, www.myhijau.my. I think that's my feedback for the first question, Mr. Padiega.
Thank you very much, Abdul Malik. Lisa, last question?
I think we're out of time, Farid, so over
Okay.
to you for the closing remarks.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot to the amazing speakers and the great presentations. And we had a very high participation with 80 participants joining today from mostly Asia, but throughout the world. So a very interesting workshop. I hope it was useful to all of you in terms of better understanding how we can measure the outputs and the outcomes of green procurement. So what I take here is that we need to speak also in terms of impacts, because outcomes can be a confusing term, because it can be an outcome of a policy and can have several meanings. But when we speak about impact, environmental and sustainability impacts, I think things are clearer. I also understand that whatever we do, all the measures should not increase the administrative burden to procurers. So this is really should be kept in mind, that in the end, we have people, we have persons that are already very overworked, overloaded, and we should not impose additional work on them. Otherwise, it won't work. So let's make sure that whatever we do it in a way that doesn't increase the burden to procurers, even though we know it's important to measure in order to manage. Also, the presentation of the results is very important. The speakers used social math examples because we need to communicate the results to a larger public. We need to explain to the public what is really the impact of the policies that are being implemented in terms of clearly reduction of GHG emissions, creation of green jobs, but also, as was mentioned in India, participation of SMEs to public procurement, which is a major objective in itself. We also need to make sure that we have, and we came back many speeches, that we have to provide consistent and comparable data for benchmarking purposes. So this is the case within the countries, but it should be also, should make this effort of harmonizing the measurement methods, the presentation of the data at global level, and UNEP, in the framework of the One Planet Network Monitoring Group, is working on that. Also, the importance of developing e-procurement platforms, which really helps to access data and to compute data and to really get information on not only the output of our sustainable public procurement policy, but also the impacts that we try to achieve. So increasing, enhancing the centrality, the availability of e-procurement platforms and their performance. With that, I will thank Lisa and all the speakers again, and all the participants for having stayed with us until the end. And we see you in 2 or 3 months' time. We're going to communicate to you the date of our next workshop in the framework of the Asia Pacific GPP network. Thank you, and have a good evening or good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.